April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. Children depend on every single caring adult in our community to make sure they are safe from sexual harm. Keeping them safe not just in April, but every day. Whether you're a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or a caregiver, we ask that you take just 3 hours out of your busy schedule to learn what you can do to make sure the precious children in your life are protected. They are worth it. Join the 13,000 SCARS certified adults by simply visiting our website to sign up for a free SCARS training session. Learn about online and body safety, how to protect them, and how to respond if they are harmed. This information is vital to their well-being and their future. Because they are children, it is our responsibility, Bermuda, to protect them. Visit scarsbermuda.com and learn what you can do to help the child in your life stay safe.
SCARS presents Survivor Hour.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Survivor Hour. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we are excited to have on set our resident expert, Dr. Alicia Hancock, and also Laree Shield, the Executive Director of the Center Against Abuse. Welcome. Also joining us all the way from New York City is a very brave Bermudian adult survivor, Sherry Lilly. We are excited to have you, Sherry. Welcome to Survivor Hour.
Thank you.
Okay, so, you might notice that we all have blue on. SCARS is supporting the Department of Child and Family Services in their Go Blue campaign for the month of April. And we're encouraging all of our viewers in Bermuda, wear blue through the month of April, and encourage, others to wear blue as we recognize National Child Abuse Prevention Month and Sexual Assault Response Month, right, Laree? I think It's teal, right?
The teal for us.
All right.
For Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so let's start with you, Laree. You and I have collaborated several times over the last decade. SCARS has, I know, been in the community for only 12 years, but the Center Against Abuse, I believe I'm correct in saying, has been in the community since 1979.
Yes, you are correct. This is our 45th year.
Wow, that's amazing. Doing great work in our community. Thank you for the service that you do. Tell us about the Center Against Abuse, because we have viewers beyond the shores of Bermuda, and so we'd love our audience to hear all about the Center Against Abuse and what you do for our community.
Sure. Like you said, we have been around since 1979, and we provide services in domestic abuse, or more specifically, intimate partner abuse, as well as sexual assault survivors. So anyone over the age of 18 and under the age of 65, we assist. And if you are a survivor of sexual assault, whether you were assaulted as a child or as an adult, we will see you as long as you are over the age of 18. Yes, wow. So we provide counseling. We provide, maybe you may need some legal advocacy with obtaining a protection order or something similar. We will assist you with going to court for a criminal matter or even a civil matter to assist you, as well as we also will go with you to the police station if you need to provide a report to the police. We just try to assist any way we can to support survivors, make them feel more comfortable as much as possible.
I mean, because we know survivors of sexual assault need support.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what helps them with their that journey. And do you find that more and more people are, through awareness, speaking up and trying to, get their voice and encouraging reporting?
It is still, sexual assault is still something that we find people reporting, unfortunately, because having to report that someone did something like that to you, it's a shame that many survivors still struggle with, right?
Right.
And so we work with them to try to get them to a space to understand this is not your shame to carry.
Right.
The scars may be there physically and even mentally, but it's not your shame to carry. And yes, while those are words, we try to work with them to get them to understand. And part of releasing that shame is actually reporting, you know.
Right.
I've had a number of people say to me, since I reported, or even since I told my story, I feel freer.
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah, we have a saying at Scars, revealing is healing, right?
Yes.
And it is part of their healing
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, but it's important who you tell. You
Yeah.
have to tell the right person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's very important.
Well, I guess you're also battling belief systems surrounding the expectations in a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, and many of us, I don't know about you, but I was raised that somebody that didn't know you, what we would call the boogeyman or dirty old man, would be somebody that would sexually assault you. But you know, as an adult, we know different now. It's normally someone you know. It can be a male or a female, and it can be perpetrated on a male or a female by either sex.
Right.
And it's about power and control at
is.
the end of the day.
It is. And how can we, as family members, friends, people who work with, you know, perhaps a survivor, how do we better support them? What can we do that really will really help them if we, you know, if there's someone in our life that is struggling, you know, that has been abused and is struggling?
Listen. That's one of the things that you definitely need to do. Listen and believe. That's very important. You can't come with some background information on your own that you try to bring to the story. Oh, well, you know, the person dressed this way. Oh, the person was drunk. No, listen and believe. That is extremely important. And then ask the person, how can I best support you? Because everybody's support looks different, right? And so maybe just, you know, when I'm down, if you would be there for me, you know?
Right.
So support looks different for everyone, but if you ask a person, how can I best support you? They might say, I just need you to pray for me.
Right.
Or they may say, you know what? You can support me by speaking to my mom or being there with me when I speak with my mom, you know? So support looks different at different times for everyone.
Yeah. Are there signs? That's what I want to ask you about. Would there be a sign? Because if a person who is struggling with this doesn't reveal, are there signs that people in their life that love them and care about them might be able to pick up on and then be able to, and then the next question would be, is there a way that we can address this without making them feel bad, but in a way that says, hey, I'm here if you need me. I've noticed. Is that good to say, I've noticed?
I was going to say that. I've noticed is definitely a way to address it. Because what it is things that we see, things that we sense, right?
Right.
And so we may see people not wanting to be touched. We may see a person either dressing provocatively or out of the blue, they're dressing extremely conservatively and are very private. They may have even started to withdraw.
Right.
Whereas they used to be very exuberant. There may be a sense of sadness with that individual as well. And just wanting to be in the background rather than the foreground if that was something that they used to do. Maybe even some behaviors that you may say, is this person depressed? What's going on here? But just total changes in the person's behavior, you know, and you can speak to, I noticed when so-and-so touched you, you pull back. Help me understand, you know, what's happening here.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, and probably isolation is one of those red flags, right? If somebody starts isolating from a family or from their friends.
Or even drug use or alcohol use,
Right.
and those types of things can also be indicators as well, or very promiscuous behaviors can be indicators. So yeah, just anything that's not of the norm with that person, you know, and it's not to say that they may have been sexually assaulted, but it's always good to say, hey, let's have a talk. I see some changes in you. What's
Yes.
happening here? Let me
Yes.
understand.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Hancock, it's a huge correlation between child sexual
very
abuse. Same kind of signs.
Same kind of language to use too, in terms of making sure that you don't use pressuring words. So it is like you said, the language of "I've noticed." So you're not telling them
Exactly.
what's going on. You're just observing and inviting them to tell you their experience.
Yeah.
And also saying, I'm here for you and you're ready to talk. Or if there's anything you wish to tell me, know that I'm here for you. Or if I'm not the right person, who do you think is the right person? And just getting them to identify somebody they feel safe speaking with.
Yeah. Because that person in their life could be threatening them.
Yes.
And
exactly.
they're saying, if you tell, I'm going to make it worse.
Yes. Yes.
So that has to be just a scary place for a survivor.
Or you can even ask, maybe you feel comfortable writing it down. Some people, it might be drawing something.
Yes.
So just giving them the options to express themselves.
Yeah. That's the same with child survivors, is sometimes children won't tell, but they might express it through drawing, through, journaling. There's just so many similarities.
Very much so. Do you find that adults often that come to you find it difficult to feel protected more so than children? Because children, at least for the most part, have teachers and they have parents, whereas adults sometimes feel a bit isolated.
Yes, I would say adults feel isolated because I think they feel more of everyone's going to know my business. I don't think children feel that as much. Or I wonder who knows. So you kind of pull back as an adult, right? Also, I find that many adults don't recognize they've been sexually assaulted, especially by a partner. When it's a partner, and I say to them, have you ever had sex that you didn't want to have, or were you ever forced to have sex? And when they say yes, I say, that was sexual assault, that was sexual abuse. And you can see them pause and think about it. I'm like, think of a stranger. If you didn't wish to have sex with a stranger or someone else you knew, and you said, no, I don't wish to do this, and they still did it, that you will call sexual abuse, sexual assault. And the same thing happens with a partner.
Yes.
And I think we don't teach that enough in schools, that this can happen with a partner as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're battling belief systems there with what the expectations are, like I said earlier, in a relationship. And then that can kind of blur the lines of what people consider to be
consensual and non-consensual.
Exactly.
No is no.
Because I think we have this set that from young, when we first had sex with that person, then that's a automatic carte blanche. You let him free, at all times.
You don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice, but you do have a choice. You always have a choice.
You sure do. And I think think about a perpetrator. They may use the excuse that they have high libido and they can't help themselves. And so the person in their life may think they're obligated to do that, even when I don't want to do it.
Yes.
Right?
And even if you think about it, sexual positions. I may consent to this sexual position, but I'm not consenting to this other sexual position.
Yeah,
correct.
And it's respecting our choices. And I think when you think about perpetrators, what do you think the percentages is? It's more about power than the act of sex. Do you think it's both? Do you think it's more about power, or do you think it's more about, I have this need and I need to get my fix, and no matter what you want or don't want, it's selfish. We're doing it, and making them feel guilty if they don't do it.
Right. And studies show that it's about power.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there's a high level of, I think, sensitivity to rejection that goes along with that as well.
Right.
So if somebody's hypersensitive to rejection, then they're going to react, a bit differently than somebody who...
Right.
Debbie,
I'm going to let Sherry pipe in. Yeah, I was just going to say, Sherry, I don't think the audience knows, other than that you're a survivor, but tell us about you and how we met and the work that you do.
We met through Laurie. I am currently one of the on-call counselors at Centers Against Abuse. And I myself am a clinical mental health professional. So I see clients from Centers Against Abuse, and I also have private practice in Bermuda. So, and then I also have a history. My first introduction to counseling was in a domestic violence shelter here in New York City. So that's where I got a lot of my foundational training. So a lot of what we're discussing today, both on the adult side and on the children's side, I've had first-hand, frontline experience with. So as I'm listening, I'm hearing, so much of a lot of what I've encountered over the last 7 or 8 years as I've done some of this work. And I wanted to say that adults also think of safety very differently than children. Adults actually understand it a little less because for us, we have agency in our lives. We have choice. Whereas with children, they're taught safety looks like this, right? Stranger danger and that type of thing. But with adults, I find that when I'm counseling adults, when I talk about safety, they'll often ask me to define, and I have to break it down to like emotional safety, and then they don't even know what that looks like. And so I think when we think of safety for adults, getting adults to a place where they feel internally safe and externally safe is interesting. It's interesting how adults perceive and conceptualize safety. And then the other thing I wanted to say as you were talking about perpetrators is that, what you're getting in terms of the power and control is you're experiencing another human being's brokenness. And so what Dr. Hancock was saying is 100% correct. They have a high sensitivity to rejection, or they have mommy or daddy issues or something in their life that they lost total control of, and they're not aware in their own emotional, mental, psychological health that this is what's happened. And so control in whatever way it comes, and in this case, we're talking about intimate partner and child sexual abuse, wherever they can find that ability to be back in control, then that's what they do. That's how they take it. So perpetrators are never whole people. We're not talking about people that are emotionally well. We're talking about people that are emotionally and psychologically broken.
I have a question. What is the difference for a perpetrator gaining the control through sex, or gaining the control through physical violence or emotional control? What do you know? Can you answer what that would look like? Because not every perpetrator physically abuses. Not every perpetrator sexually abuses. Not every perpetrator emotionally abuses. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, every perpetrator emotionally abuses. You will always walk away with emotional and psychological abuse. Why? Because most times with intimate partner violence, you're talking about a breaking down of self. Perpetrators do not go after strong individuals. They go after individuals that, for whatever reason, are demonstrating their own kind of weakness. And when I say weakness, I'm not saying that I am weak. I'm a weak individual, but I have my own vulnerabilities. That's probably a better word, for whatever reason. And so I think the way perpetrators pick how they abuse, I think that really depends on the individual. But you will always walk away with emotional and psychological abuse. I don't know what separates necessarily a sexual predator versus a financial predator, or someone that's a stalker, but they don't necessarily harm in other ways. I'm not sure how they get there. It'll have to be there. We would have to do a whole psychological workup on each of them. But you will always walk away with psychological and emotional abuse when, whether it's financial, whether it's social media, whether, whatever other type of abuse, along with sexual abuse, you will always walk away with emotional and psychological abuse.
Now that we have you and we are listening to your wisdom, talk to us about your experience of childhood sexual abuse.
Absolutely. So I am a Bermudian, grew up in Bermuda. I'm madly in love with my beautiful country, by the way. But I grew up in Bermuda. I grew up in a very religious family. I started my life with my parents married, my mom and my dad, and they were both working class people. And so me and my siblings, I am the middle child of five, and there were four of us in the house. I have an older brother who was not in our home with us. But we pretty much had a decent life. You know, my parents provided for us. My mother worked in the hotel industry. And and so she would often take us sometimes on the weekends when she worked extra shifts, and we could play on the grounds of the hotel. Let me just age myself really quickly because I'm not afraid to do that. Although I look 30, I am not. My mother worked at what was Holiday Inn in St. George's, which is now, I guess, the St. Regis. And she would take us and we could play on the grounds there. So we knew a lot of her coworkers. And so on this, my first encounter with sexual abuse as a child, I was 6 or 7. And we would come home from school. We lived directly across from this beautiful big playground. And my siblings would chuck their book bags in the yard and go across the street. But I was a bookworm. I've always been a bookworm. And I had a new book and I sat in the yard with my book. And so I was sitting there, my siblings were playing. And, in those days, now they have a term called latchkey kids, but we weren't considered latchkey kids back then. The whole community took care of all of us. And so we weren't the only children across the street playing. But I was sitting in the yard by myself on this particular day, and this individual came. I didn't have any reason to be afraid. I knew him. He worked at the hotel with my mother. And he kind of engaged in conversation with me, and I'm telling him about my book because I'm super excited about this book. And he asked where my siblings were, and I told him they're across the street playing. And he said, "Okay, why aren't you playing?" I said, "I just want to read my book." And he asked me if I wanted to go for a walk, and I said, "No, I want to read my book." And he gently cajoled me until I finally said yes. And the way that the house that I lived in was situated, we could just get up and walk a few steps and we would have been on the sidewalk, which is right on the street. Or you could circle the back of the house and come around onto the same sidewalk from the other side. So it didn't faze me again at age 6 or 7 that when he took my hand to walk, we didn't walk a few steps to the sidewalk. We started to go around to the back of the house. Again, it didn't faze me a bit because you could come around to the other side. But as we got to the back of the house, in the back of the house, there was a pump room. For those that might be watching that don't understand what that is, Bermuda homes have their own external water tanks. And then there's a pump that pulls the water from the tank into the home so that you get water out of your faucets. So there was this pump room. And as we turned the corner to the back of the house, he just walked me right into the pump room. I didn't resist. I didn't know what was happening. And he takes me into the pump room. And it was in this pump room, and I it's so funny. I'm telling the story, and as I'm telling the story, I'm hearing the rhythm of the pump. I remember hearing the rhythm of the pump, and I will say that I actually call this first encounter sexual assault because he actually, I would say, raped me. I was a child, and he penetrated me. So, and I remember him lifting me up against the wall of the pump room, and whatever he did, he did. And I'm a therapist, so I can actually say what happened now. I didn't know then, but I completely dissociated. And what that means is that I actually just kind of came out of myself so that my brain wouldn't allow the trauma to overwhelm me. So it took many years of my own therapy to even understand what had happened. And so when it was over, I knew something had happened. And I remember lots of feelings, but I don't have too much memory of anything else. I remember the feeling of everything. And then he walked, straightened me up, and walked me back out to the front, sat me down where I was with my book, sat down with me, and very gently talked to me and said, this is our secret. You're my special girl. You can't tell anybody. If you tell anybody, then you're going to get in trouble first, and then I'm going to get in trouble. So at 6 or 7, I totally internalized that. And I remember being upset, not about what just had happened, because I wasn't sure, but I was like, my mom is going to kill me because my uniform is dirty. That's what I remember. And I remember getting up and trying to dust off my uniform and get the dirt off of my uniform. And he left. And I just sat there. I don't remember picking up the book again. I just remember kind of being in a bit of a daze. My mom comes home, where she's yelling out to the kids to come, and it's 4 of us, and she's wrangling us all into some kind of order, and no one saw me. And what I mean by that, they saw me with eyes, but no one saw that I was quiet. No one saw that I was dirty. They just, and so it happened to be that particular day, and Bermudians can relate to this, right? It was bath day. So with 4 children and buying water, we took like full baths about every other day. And on the off days, we bathed from the sink. But today happened to be bath day. And I remember going into the bathroom. And as I was preparing for my bath, I noticed that there was blood in my undergarments. So I took toilet paper, wrapped it up, and threw it in the trash, and proceeded to take my bath and go on about business as usual. One of the significant things that was kind of a residual of this event was that I started wetting the bed. So now I started getting in trouble with my mom, because all of a sudden, when Laurie talks about like behavioral changes, I was not a bedwetter. All of a sudden, I'm wetting the bed. And anytime I felt stress, I would wet myself. So even at school, I wore glasses, so I was picked on a lot. I loved books, so I didn't have like a lot of social skills. So even at school now, when I was teased or bullied or called 4 eyes, I would wet myself. And then I would just get in trouble with mom. I would get disciplined, but I never told. I filed it away. After a while, it wasn't even a thought. I didn't remember. It didn't come up. I don't remember having, really significant nightmares or anything like that as a child. I just know that I felt afraid. I knew that internally something was different. I was definitely more withdrawn. And then I had this bedwetting that was going on. Now, if I fast forward, I wish I could tell you that was it. I wish I could tell you that this was the one event in my life and it was over. And as an adult, I got fixed. That's not what happened. Around age 11, my parents divorced, and my mom moved away with all 4 children. And before I go any further, I always love to kind of redeem my mom a bit, because my mom is of a particular generation. And dealing with these kind of situations, they definitely had zero skills, zero knowledge of what to do. And they were raised, our parents were raised in a generation of secrecy. And so she didn't know, because I never told her. But now we moved away, and she's divorced from my father, and a beautiful woman working really hard. She worked lots of jobs. So I kind of became a bit of a caregiver in my home. I do have one brother that's older than me that lived at home with us, but he couldn't take care of himself. So I took care of the family a bit. And my mother had friends. That's what they were always called. And over the course of the many years before I left Bermuda, mom had different friends, and every single one of them molested me. All of them. And at one point in time, we lost our home. And so we were separated for a bit. So now I'm dealing with, trying to help mom with the family. I'm trying to do well in school. I have these men that are abusing me. And then now I'm homeless, basically. I'm not homeless in Victoria Park, but homeless, sleeping in different places. I stayed at my grandparents for a bit. And then I stayed other places for a bit. And a family took me in for a year, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I thought this was the Cosby Show, really. But just all of these accumulation of different traumas. And then in the middle of all of that, I also get diagnosed with this eye disease that I'm going to go blind. And I just remember feeling like, okay, you don't have a choice but to really figure out how to keep going and get through. But one day, something happened, and I decided I'm going to tell my sister that this particular individual was molesting me. And I told her, and she said, well, you have to tell Mom. And I said, I can't tell Mom. And she said, I'll go with you. So she took me. She went with me, and I went to tell my mother. I told my mom. My mom took a breath, and then my mom changed the subject. Again, I have to redeem my mother. She did exactly what she knew to do, which was nothing, because she didn't know what to do. But I do remember just feeling like, okay, what does that mean? Does it mean you don't believe me? And when she went silent, so did I. Her response told me, you can't talk about this, and let's move past this. And so I did, but I do remember just feeling like, this is my hero. This is my shero. And if she's not going to be able to come in and save me, then nobody will. So now I have to take care of myself. And I made a vow that I would never allow anyone, no one's going to save me. No one's going to take care of me. I'm going to take care of me. And I really lived that out for the rest of my teen years. I was probably around age 14 or 15 at that time. And I came straight into my young adulthood. And the way it showed up was a lot of defensiveness. I stayed ahead of the hurt. You weren't going to hurt me before I could hurt you. It also showed up with, I could not maintain healthy relationships, period. Friendships, in the workplace, I just couldn't keep relationships intact. And if you got very close to me, then I would sabotage the relationships. And I realize now, after doing my own work, that a lot of what that was my own internal feelings of unworthiness, or feeling dirty, or feeling broken. And I absolutely could not let anybody see that. And because I thought of myself that way, very unconsciously thought of myself that way, then that's how I thought others would see me as well. And so I really just did not keep relationships, healthy relationships. And so it really had a negative impact on me that way. And then, fast forward just a couple more years, at 20 years old, I get married. I'm searching, I'm seeking for a love and affection, because it was skewed. Love was skewed. The only thing that kept me very sane is my faith. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here. But along with my faith, there was just this broken child inside of me that's now coming into adulthood and bring all of the accumulated trauma with me into my marriage. And it definitely showed up to where I end up marrying an abuser. He was very emotionally abusive, very kind of narcissistic, and very often would berate me. And there were times that he stepped out of our marriage. And now, Debbie, what ends up happening with all this accumulation of trauma that I had never had an opportunity to voice, I had never voiced it up until I got married, is that now my mind started telling me, you definitely, this ain't it. This is not it. And the pain, the level of pain started to manifest actually physically. I started to not feel well sometimes. I remember sometimes my heart would be racing. And all of these things started to happen to the point that I became suicidal and had my first son. And I just remember that with the words that were coming from this next person that had committed and promised to loving me and taking care of me, now the words that were coming from his mouth was words that were rejecting me again. So that similar feeling that I had when I spoke to my mom, and she didn't know what to do and kind of left me out there by myself, I was now feeling again. And that's what triggered these feelings of, you're no good for this person, you're no good for your son. It was just this pain that I couldn't put my finger on, and I didn't know how to make go away. And so I attempted suicide twice. Thank God I'm here. So clearly it didn't work, but that's where it took me. It took me to this place where this unresolved trauma that started in a pump room at age 6 and then accumulated and accumulated and accumulated over the years. Remember, layered on top of that is now I have this diagnosis that I'm going to go blind one day, and I am blind. But just moving through my life, right, and really recognizing how this affected me. It wasn't really until that suicide attempt that I had my first opportunity to voice all of what I had been through. And so a friend of my family came and picked me up and took me to go and see, it was his sister-in-law, but she's now currently my pastor's wife. And that lady spent 24 hours with me. We didn't sleep. And she didn't only pray, but she talked to me and she gave me voice. She let me cry. I laid on her floor. And that was the first time that I ever had an opportunity to really share what I was going through. What was interesting was that at that time, my husband had walked out. He had gone on a trip to go see another woman. And all of these things were happening all at the same time. But that first encounter with the ability to speak my truth was the beginning of my path and my journey to healing. And so today, if I can come all the way forward now, eventually my husband, who had his own mommy issues, was abandoned as a child himself at age 2, just no longer could just tolerate the responsibility of our family. I was going blind. That didn't fit into whatever. And the emotional abuse had taken its toll. And I started to stand up for myself. And he left 12 years ago, walked out the door. And again, trauma. But I had started my journey. I wasn't anywhere near finished, but I knew that I could do something better now. And so maybe 2 weeks after he walked out the door, my little boy, my youngest was 2. He came and he on a Saturday morning, I wasn't getting out of bed and I hadn't been getting out of bed. And he said, "Mom, are you going to get up today?" And it just shook me. It shook me at my core. And I jumped up and I said, "Okay, Sherry, you can't do this because now it's not just you. You have these 5 amazing children that came from this relationship that you are responsible for, and they are watching you." And so I prayed and I said, "Okay, God, you're going to have to help me." Now, after that first encounter with my pastor's wife, every now and then I would talk with her, but I didn't go to therapy yet. It wasn't until after my husband left that I actually started therapy. So, and then I picked up, I decided, I made a choice. I made a choice. That one comment from my little boy woke me up from my core. And I made a choice to get help. And I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to care for these children? I was a stay-at-home mom. I lived on a fixed disability income. My husband left me with debt. He left me with rent unpaid. He also took whatever money was in my account before he left. So he left me with no money 2 weeks before the beginning of school. And there started my journey of humility and really learning how to advocate for myself, thus my spirit of advocacy. And I went off to school. I reached out, and now I'm blind. I have been losing my sight over the years, and he left right at the point where I had lost the last of my usable vision. So I had to reach out to the New York State Commission for the Blind. I got all my services, how to use my cane. I learned that they had a program that taught blind people how to go to school. And I said, "School? I'm going to go to school." So I did. At 43 and blind, I went off and got my bachelor's degree in psychology and counseling. I graduated at the top of my class. I left my undergrad degree with with 4 different awards. And then I wasn't planning on doing anything further. I patted myself on the back and said, good girl, now your children have no excuse. And then I was challenged to go further. And I said no. And then this scholarship just popped into my lap where I didn't have to pay a penny. So off I went to my master's program at Fordham University, and I earned my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And so my journey came full circle because now I had been in therapy for years and years. I had done my work. I had begun to experience that you can heal. You can heal. You can heal. And so now my passion work is to serve others as best as I can as a therapist, and to meet people right where they're at. I love working with survivors because I understand. And I want them to know that they can experience freedom and that they can be healed, and that I'm a living, walking, talking example of that. And so I find this work extremely meaningful. And I'm loving life. I'm enjoying life. And I have a practice in Bermuda. My children were born here in New York, so I come back and forth. And I'm just so grateful. Laurie came into my life. And the opportunity opened up to work with Centers Against Abuse, and I jumped at that opportunity. And so now to serve this population in Bermuda is just my joy, along with those that I have in my private practice. So I'm grateful. That's my story, and and it's been a journey. But I will end with this: that one of my favorite scriptures is found in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. It's at the end of the story of Joseph. And for those that may not know the story of Joseph, his father gave him a coat of many colors. He was the favorite. The brothers try to kill him. He ends up in Egypt, in jail. All kinds of really traumatic things happen to Joseph, but he ends up second in command to the Pharaoh. And there's a famine. His brothers that sold him into slavery are finally with him, but his father passes away, and the brothers are afraid that he's going to now retaliate for the things that they did to him. So they write him a letter just saying, Dad's gone, but please, please, please don't hurt us. That's found in Genesis chapter 50. But what verse 20 says is him speaking to his brothers. And he says, listen, what you, my brothers, meant to harm me, God meant for my good. I know a lot of us know that part of the scripture, but there's a second part. It says this: to accomplish the work that I am now doing, the saving of many lives. That is the scripture that I use to govern my life. The thing that was meant to harm me, God doesn't clean it up. He doesn't make it pretty. He doesn't spray it with perfume and surround it with rose petals. He takes that same broken, messed up situation, and he uses it for his good, so that he can position us in places that we can save other lives. And so that's how I go about my life. Is it easy? Not at all. I'm still blind. I'm still raising children. But because I recognize that there was purpose in all of that pain, then I feel obligated and compelled with God's grace to walk that out. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm walking it out, and I'm trusting God to help me to continue to walk it out in a way that serves others and that pleases him.
Wow. Well, Sherry, you are exceptional.
Yes.
I mean, I'm never speechless, but I'm emotional. I'm speechless. For me, it's gratitude to you, Sherry. You are a ray of hope for our community of Bermuda, for the survivors in our country that have had so much pain and have had to deal with sexual abuse as children. This is a message to them that there is hope, that we can heal, and that it does hurt. But I can't thank you enough. I thank Laurie for introducing me for the second time to you. I know we were introduced briefly at an event a few years ago, but I mean, I want the other ladies here to speak, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a voice and for providing our adult survivors with hope. And I want to send a message to the parents of little children, just pay attention to signs. Just as we teach in our training, bedwetting, nightmares, pay attention because children may not tell, but there will be a sign that shows something, as Larry said, a change of behavior or something. And start asking some open-ended questions and pay attention. But you are definitely just a light in my life, and I'm just thankful for you for being a guest on this show. But go ahead, Larry.
Thank you for having.
Thank you so much, Sherry, with sharing your story, because in your sharing, you gave a pattern of, it wasn't just like, oh, I blossomed and this is what happened. You showed a pattern of, I was sexually assaulted and then I was sexually assaulted again. And that's a pattern that a lot of people go through. That is not just a one-time event. Something predisposes them to being sexually assaulted again. I don't know what it is, but I've heard that multiple times, that I've been sexually assaulted by more than one person, right? And so thank you for sharing that, so people don't feel alone in that, as well as sharing, I was depressed, I did this, I even lost my sight. It's a lot of balls in the ear, and now you can't see them, right? But just having the opportunity to unstick yourself, because so many people get stuck and they don't know where to go and what to do, but there is help available. We want those of you that are out there today that are stuck in a pattern and you feel like there's no way out. There is a way out. There is help available to you. We want to let you know that you can contact the Center Against Abuse, and we will provide some assistance so that you can move forward. And as Sherry says, that there is freedom at that end day.
Absolutely. And you are worthy.
Yes.
You are important.
Yes.
You deserve to heal. And you can. And, thank you, Larry. That was beautiful. Dr. Hancock, last word.
Yeah, your ability to overcome this is just absolutely remarkable. And again, sharing the story of the pattern of abuse that you experienced with very, very little support and guidance is incredible. So, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And if I can speak, and for those that may be parents and your child has shared with you, and you don't know how to respond, because many of us don't know how to respond, or many of us may respond as we were responded to, right? And that pattern continues. Seek help now, because you're also holding on to guilt and other hurt feelings, and more than likely you were sexually assaulted as well. And so we wanted to let you know, as a parent, there is also help and healing for you as well.
Yes. I mean, SCARS will say, get SCARS certified, get the education, but never be afraid to say, I don't have the answers. I need some help with this. I need some guidance with this. And this is why education and awareness is so important, because as you said, Sherry, our parents didn't have this information years ago. They didn't understand how to respond. They didn't know what to look out for. And we're just grateful for awareness and prevention education and for this show. So thank you, Sherry. Any last words, Sherry?
Yes, I think that in Bermuda, one of the other things that we have to be cognizant of is that, our island is so small. And so, we have been taught to maintain these secrets. And when we keep secrets, what we're not understanding is that we're not keeping the secret. The secret is keeping us. So we perpetuate secrets that turn into silence. Silence turns into solitude. And when you look, you have adults who are not functioning, really, really well in our lives. So breaking the stigma, Debbie, when you invited me to do this, I said yes right away. And I have friends and family in Bermuda that are not going to be happy that I'm here. But I can't allow your shame to prevent me from maintaining my peace and maintaining my freedom. And so healing cannot come without revealing. I think I heard you say that, right, Debbie? You cannot heal what you won't reveal. And so if you're going through your life and you're struggling, one of the things we didn't talk about was anger. We see a lot of lashing out, or we see men and women who are just always sharp with their tongues and angry. And you see all these manifestations of dysfunction and maladaptive behaviors. And we're just unwilling because we live in a community, in a society that has perpetuated silence and secrecy as normal. And it shouldn't be. If you're being harmed, if you're being hurt, look, I went all the way to being suicidal, right? So people get to a point where they can't bear the burden anymore. So we have to break the cycles and the patterns of abuse. And I'm very glad that I believe that we're living with a generation now that do not flow that same way. They have more access to information. They have more vocabulary. So all of the awareness and education needs to continue to happen. But I am really, really glad for this generation from the millennials down, who really see this as something that should not be normal. And so you might find that they're stepping up much more than our parents ever did. But I think generally as a society, we have to be careful as a community in Bermuda that we don't continue to perpetuate this secrecy that came from our forefathers, that is rooted in our slave history for many of us, right? All of these things that we have passed down that become intergenerational traumas. And then that's a whole other, situation. And it just gets passed on and passed on and passed on. We have got to break the cycles and decrease the stigma.
Yes, and we have to call out adults that don't support survivors. We do need to call that out. We cannot be blaming victims for child sexual abuse. We cannot be blaming, children for speaking up and for being angry at the survivor for telling.
Yeah, I think there's too much of a concern for people being more concerned about the consequences of revealing versus the consequences of the survivor and the victim themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nicely put. That's really nicely put. Because that survivor needs the support and needs healing. And it's very important that we react responsibly. Now we know. So when we know better, we do better. And it's very important that our child survivors and victims and survivors receive the support from all the family. They need people to wrap themselves around that child and give that child everything they need. That adult perpetrator can take care of themselves. Go get some help. You're going to, be accountable to the consequences of committing a crime against a child. But we cannot blame children when they reveal about what has happened to them as children. We have to support those children.
And that also stands for adults who have been sexually assaulted. As an adult, there's a lot of victim blaming, and so we as a society need to stop victim blaming and actually do the support for the adult, because no one asks to be sexually assaulted.
Exactly. I love that, and I think we're going to end there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Survivor Hour. Thank you, Laree, for all you do with the Center Against Abuse. Thank you, Dr. Hancock, for sitting on the SCARS board and sitting next to me at these during these shows, and for your wisdom. And Sherry, you are my Shiro. You are. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your bravery and, just enlightening us and educating us and empowering us. And, sending the message that we are all worthy, there is purpose in pain, and we can heal from the wounds of childhood sexual abuse. So thank you so much.
I guess part of the expecting it, though, also opens you and these predators. They, there's something about animals in the wild, right? They stand back and they look for the one whose leg is broken in the pack. And then they go for that animal that has something wrong, that something that's going to slow them down so that they can't run. And I think I finally got to a point where I use that kind of analogy to help me understand why it kept happening over and over. I feel like there was just some part of my already broken self was showing up. And I don't know, you know, did I lean into it? Like, what was it? It didn't matter after a while, but it was just to understand that, people that are predators, they look for something. There's some indicator that shows that this person is a possibility. And every, all perpetrators, I guess, know how to hone in on that. But I did expect it. I did kind of think it was always going to happen. And I feel like my mom, I think Dr. Hancock, that was you that was just speaking. Yeah, I told Debbie when we pre-interviewed, I'm sorry, Debbie, I forgot in the story, but my mother, she kind of scapegoated me a bit because these men were coming around, and I think as part of her survival, she did turn an eye away. I don't know that she knew the intensity or how often or whatever, but I also protected her. I also protected my mother because she was working hard and she was trying to keep food on the table. And so if it meant that the way that was going to happen was going to be that these people were going to do what they had to do, then I almost felt like, well, this is the part that I can play. So the way my mind work changed over the years as I got older, but when I finally got to where I wanted to tell, it's like I knew better now. I didn't like the way it felt. I didn't want to be the caregiver anymore. And so I told, and it just didn't work. And so it continued. But I felt like I was taking care of my mom. I didn't want her to not be able to care for us. We still ended up homeless. And I just knew that I could help her. That's how I thought. Very skewed, warped thinking, but that's what was happening in my mind, that I needed to take care of her and protect her. And if I told, she would get in trouble too. All of these things went through my mind. So part of the residual of a lot of the abuse that I encountered was that, understanding what a healthy male looked like. I couldn't put my finger on that at all. As a matter of fact, I didn't care. Like, it didn't matter to me whether, I never thought about a healthy male. I married a man that was unhealthy. And I think that coming into contact with men over the years, as long as I had not done my work, all men, every single one of them, I don't care who you are. You could be my pastor. You could be the president of my university. No man was trustworthy. No man. No man was trustworthy. I think the only person that I never was afraid of in terms of their manhood was my father, because my father was completely unaware until the day he died. I never told him. And my dad was probably one of the most gentle, loving people. And so he was the only one I felt comfortable with, but I didn't live with him anymore. And then I moved to the United States, and then he wasn't here. It wasn't until later in life that I got to care for him as an adult here in the US, but he was the only one. But there was not another male human being that walked on this earth that I trusted. It wasn't until, and I had no model. There was no model for me that said, this is what a healthy male looks like, because the men that were coming around that were supposed to be representatives of, people that showed up and cared for others in my family, my mom's boyfriends or whoever, they were all abusing me. So it couldn't be that there was a healthy male out there. So it wasn't until I really did my own internal work, I had to frame that based on scripture and based on what I knew now as an adult. I had to step up as a woman now and define for myself what healthy looks like in general for everybody. And then now doing my work, I could go to people like my pastor. I could go to people that were in my friend circle and ask questions about, well, why do you guys do it this way? Or why do you guys do it that way? But it took me doing my own work in order to begin to understand how to choose a healthy relationship. So when my husband left, I'm still single. He's been gone for 12 years. I'm divorced for 3. And it's so interesting that maybe just in this last year, I actually said to God, okay, I feel like my heart is healed enough. Should you ever choose for me to be in a relationship again, I think I can. And so I just continue making sure I'm good and that I stay present and well, in my own life, so that should love show up again, I can recognize it for what it truly is supposed to look like, and not through the skewed lens of my many, many, many years of childhood and adult abuse. So, it's difficult. It's very challenging. You have to do your work before you can really step into healthy relationships with men, or recognize healthy relationships with men, be able to speak up for yourself and all of that kind of stuff. It took my healing. Otherwise, there was no man on the face of this earth that I deemed trustworthy.
To learn how to trust your own judgment.
That's it.
Over the course
you have
of
to
time.
you have to regain your trust of your own internal senses of right and wrong, and your own judgments, and then that self-love. When I started to really understand that I am worthy and that, I have something to offer the world, when I started loving myself, and then, if you're not religious, then you can do what you want with this. But for me, it was really the unconditional love of God that showed up after my husband left, and I had to figure it out. Like, remember, I had nothing. He left me with nothing. I had rent due in 2 weeks. And the first, I want to say 4 years after he left, was all about just recovering my household, stabilizing my children. And here I was, again, broken and traumatized, and I'm having to care for everybody else, and at the same time figure out how to care for me. Part of that process involved me reconnecting with who I truly am. I had to go find myself. I had to go reclaim my identity. And when I did that, it was really with the love of God that really helped me. Now I feel like, listen, I could spot you a mile away, even though I'm blind. You could be across the street. I'll know you ain't the one. It don't take much, because now I think I experience God's love, which is pure and right and always true. And that now has become the real barometer for a healthy male. So I will tolerate nothing less than the amazing way that God showed up for me, and has been showing up for me over the last 12 years. So I feel sorry for the guy, unless he really is walking with God himself. He's going to have a very, very, very high standard to meet, and I will take nothing less because I deserve it. I'll just say that, that sometimes, the messages that we give our children come from our own place of fear or misunderstanding or lack of information. So if you, as a father and as a man, if you are modeling healthy manhood for your daughters, then you don't have to tell them that they don't have to trust any man ever, and that they're all liars. Because what they will do is that they will choose men that are reflections of their dad. So if you're modeling healthy manhood and having those healthy man conversations with your girls, they will go out in the world, right? And nothing is a sure thing, but this is the greatest protective factor around our daughters, is that when their fathers show up and remind them every day that they are the princess of the whole universe, and that if the man don't behave as nice as their daddy did to them, then he ain't the one. So keep modeling healthy manhood to your daughters and your granddaughter, right? And they will grow up and they will put you as the barometer for how they choose, their relationships. Friendships too. Friendships intimate partner relationships, all of the male relationships will be a reflection of who their father is.
How old were you when your father was no longer in your life? When did he stay here and you went to New York?
My dad was always present. We just didn't live with him anymore. For a little while, we went on weekends. After a while, we stopped. So we saw him. I would go to lunch with him. He worked at Pierming Watlington's, and I would go to town and go meet him for lunch. So he was always around and present, and a very sweet, gentle man. But when I left Bermuda, I was 16. And then the rest of my family was in Bermuda. But what I didn't get from my dad was the consistent presence that really helped to heal what was already broken. I think he could have, if I was around him a lot more. And it's no fault of his. It was just the way that my life went. So I don't fault my father. I think, like I said, I think he was the only one that I really trusted 100%, because my father never, nothing. My dad was the best gentle soul that he could be, as a divorced man who had some limitations, around that and so on and so forth. But the presence that I would have needed at that time in my life for my father's healthy manhood to heal the skewed view that I was now viewing men through, he just wasn't there enough. No fault of his. So definitely I would consider myself absent of a father, but not in the typical way. It was just absence of a father being present consistently enough to help me find my way to healing.
April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. Children depend on every single caring adult in our community to make sure they are safe from sexual harm. Keeping them safe not just in April, but every day. Whether you're a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or a caregiver, we ask that you take just 3 hours out of your busy schedule to learn what you can do to make sure the precious children in your life are protected. They are worth it. Join the 13,000 SCARS certified adults by simply visiting our website to sign up for a free SCARS training session. Learn about online and body safety, how to protect them, and how to respond if they are harmed. This information is vital to their well-being and their future. Because they are children, it is our responsibility, Bermuda, to protect them. Visit scarsbermuda.com and learn what you can do to help the child in your life stay safe.